Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network, and I am here with another Phoenix Roundtable where we're going to go over a fun topic. Well, maybe fun, unless this is not something you really are into, and that's what I like to call distraction-based gameplay. But more specifically, we're going to go over what is the unlock from the Kickstarter stretch goal, the Tavern Games. I have brought back two returning guests. First off, we have Telchar, the guild leader of Sons of the Seven. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be back and a lot of input on this kind of interesting topic.
Absolutely. The other one you see down there, that's Sinbad, one of the guild leaders of Vengeance, and Ashes of Creation exclusive guild. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me back. Excited to be here today.
And I even let you outside. I didn't keep you in the dungeon for that long, but you willingly came back.
Yes, I did.
It's like a Stockholm syndrome, you know?
You gotta be a glutton for punish. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Before we get going, I want to give a special thank you to Willow Night Song from Australia for leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. I am sorry if I missed it. iTunes sucks when it comes to actually seeing your reviews because they separate it all out by country. And there's no easy way to see all countries without like going to each individual country and looking. And I just so happened to look at Australia and saw that. So thank you so much. And of course, if you want to leave a review for the show, we would really appreciate it. It allows people to know that we are a real podcast, that we say words, and sometimes they actually are relevant. Not often, but sometimes. So there you go. Thank you so much. Willow Night Song. There we go. I had it written down and I had to find it on my notes. Thank you so much for the review. I really do appreciate it. It's awesome. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and just jump right on into the topic for today. Tavern Games. Now, this was something I was excited when Kickstarter had its thing and this was a goal, because this is always something that I thought brought immersion to a game, right? Like, it makes the world feel alive, and I always thought they were interesting. And, some of the older MMOs and even some of the newer ones had things you could do as a side thing, because, like you'd be sitting there waiting for your group to get on or, waiting to get stuff together, and you're like, well, what am I going to do? And these little mini games were something that would bridge the time while waiting. I mean, there were apps early on in World of Warcraft's days that people developed as third-party add-ons that you could play, like Tetris. There were applications that allowed you, before they added things into the game. So I guess what we're going to do first is the main question I have for mini games. What are other games doing? What other types of these distraction-based gameplay are other games actually doing? So Telchar, why don't you go ahead and go first?
I kind of missed out a lot of the more modern examples of where this is done in kind of a fantasy fantasy MMO setting. But excuse me, a lot of my experience with the kind of either kind of gambling or other kind of similar gameplay was from EVE Online, where there was lots of lottery type things that had a very rapid pacing to them, even like down to like several hours. You could buy a ticket, and then the game systems allowed you to, the person running the lottery to then disperse the one asset or whatever it is, cash, back to the person. And there is several examples of people running off with the lottery money and ruining everyone's day and having no fun. But there was a lot of people that wasted a lot of time and a lot of money gambling for tickets that would then give you ships or weapons, et cetera, and entire industries were built around quick delivery of those rewards. So if you're going to kind of rewind back to the days of like, wow, I think that people were able to come up with their own entertainment in the game, and whenever the game was in its glory days of vanilla, the distraction-based gameplay was go and kill some people in Terran Mill. Like, it wasn't like you needed to find fun. It was there. So maybe that's a fault of the game for not having good entertainment anymore. So.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Sinbad, what about you?
So I also come from that old school gamer, like for me, I remember playing Bazak in freaking KOTOR back in the day, then a single player game. But that was really fun being able to, kind of learn that game, that card game style of play. Other games like Hearthstone, it's kind of like its own mini game in a sense, but it's also a separate game. In Skyrim, you also have a lot of mods now for different mini games that are appearing in there. One of my favorites is mini fishing. Basically being able to kind of sit out a pond and just fish and get scores for each fish you catch. So stuff like that. I'm really into things that kind of are interactive, that do take a little bit of skill, but also a little bit of luck. And seeing games like, even Pokemon back in the day, they had their own little casino that you could go into and you get points and you try to go buy that Pokemon you like. Stuff like that. It's awesome.
It's actually funny that you said fishing. Because I do like fishing, and a lot of games actually have fishing as a way of getting resources for like the cooking profession or whatever, provisioning, whatever you want to call the cooking profession in the game. But speaking of what other games have done, Final Fantasy XIV is interesting in this case. I know it's more of a modern-esque MMO, but when you mentioned fishing, I almost forgot about this. But they actually have a fishing log that you can complete, and it actually has it like, the fish story of, I caught a fish, it was this big, and it gets bigger. It actually tracks like what it generates a fish size, and it gives you like a record. Like, this is the largest of this type of fish that you've ever caught. There's not a lot of mini game to it, and you could compare with your friends, but there's like not a leaderboard or anything, at least not as far as I know. But it was
you could also you could play challenge into games like that too. You can make it more difficult to catch rarer fish. Like having to hit like a timer on a specific second in order to be able to get that. So you can add like some type of challenge into those mini games and then compare scores with your friends. So stuff like that in that game, that would be awesome in Ashes of Creation.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny what like you said, Telchar, you said it earlier, in vanilla World of Warcraft, people made their games, like what they could do. I mean, that's something you could do within Ashes of Creation. Like, okay, we're doing a fishing night, right? For whatever reason, I don't know. We'll just say we need food and we need lots of people to fish. So you do a fishing night. That was actually something we used to do in the DCN guild in Elder Scrolls Online. We actually did what I call drinking and fishing, because that always makes it more fun. Where we all got on Discord, we all had a adult beverage of choice, and then we went fishing for several hours. And the hilarity that ensued was something that we had fun with. But doing something like that and encouraging, like, okay, if they did generate fishing and the fish actually had sizes to them, it'd be like, okay, whoever caught the largest size, like everyone can like donate money into a pool, and whoever caught the largest fish or whatever, or whoever caught the most fish would get the pot. Now, you could either make that an in-game system or you can let players do it. I know we'll probably talk about it later, but there was a live stream today that we were recording, but we're not ready to talk about that, or else I would have had it in there. But I need to analyze and get everything together. They made mention about gambling and not liking the idea of systems for people to game it. So, I mean, that might be something they may never do, like putting in a pot system where people throw in money into a virtual pot, and then whoever wins whatever the stakes are can go out, because they'll just let that on the agency of the players. But I thought that was an interesting concept when you mentioned fishing, just because fishing is fishing. I don't know. Some of the thoughts that I had from other games, and I'm glad I got a chance to pick this up. And I'll touch on every game, and we can all talk about it. Like, one of the first things, and it's very popular nowadays, right? Like, there's so many of them now that are coming out. But card games, right? Like, Final Fantasy XI had a card game, but it was separate. It was their triple triad from one of their older single-player titles, right? And it was its own separate system. Now, they brought it back in Final Fantasy XIV. And, I mean, then you have spin-offs in, like, World of Warcraft with Hearthstone. Yes, it's not in the game, but I think I said in pre-show how much I always thought it would be neat where like I'm waiting for my raid to get together and I can pull up a Hearthstone within World of Warcraft and just get all meta in that level, you know, Inception, a game within a game within a game. And I think that would be pretty neat. But, you know, then we got like Elder Scrolls Legends. So card games are something that are really, really big right now. Like really big. Do you guys feel like, and I'm going to bring it into question 2 because I have a lot of these comments. Do you feel like card games would fit within Ashes of Creation?
I think that it's possible, but I would rather them do more of like a numerical card kind of game, like a poker or a blackjack or some kind of like spin-off with a fantasy kind of theme on that versus the TCG type card game where you're collecting unit type things to play that do your abilities and stuff like that. I'd rather have more of a traditional card games in terms of you know, the what you would expect to see in like the real world. Not so realistic that it's like playing Uno, but you know, like some kind of like poker type game that, you know, is well established. Most people know how to, if they play card games like that, they know how to play poker, and it's a very simple, like, oh, it's just a different symbol or a different set of numbers and rules to make this happen, and it's very easy to transition into. Because my problem is that when you get to the card game thing, it becomes so consuming that it distracts from the actual game. So there'll be people that don't, especially if they can't play it offline, they'll just get on Ashes, AFK in their farm freehold, and play the card game all day. Like, that's all they'll do. It's like, okay, you're paying $15 a month to play this. That's, I guess, just gonna have a lot of zombies around, you know. Like, so unless you have to do it in person and you actually have to interact with the board and stuff, that would be interesting. Like, where you actually have to go to a location,
like a tavern,
at an actual tavern, sit down, and you have to play Gwent, or you have to actually do it at the location. You can't just pull up a thing and interface and play the game.
And I think that's kind of where we're, even when I concepted Tavern Games, is they were intending to put them only in taverns, so you actually have to be in a tavern to access it. And I do think that's kind of neat because it brings in that concept of you're, you know, living in the world. You're going to a tavern. Like, you go to a bar nowadays, I mean, they have all those little electronic games and whatever. But that's kind of what you do. You drink and then you're playing games at the same time. And I actually really, really like that. Like, the reason why I brought up the card games is it kind of pulls a dual purpose. I'm a collector. I don't know about you guys are, but I have a terrible habit of collecting everything under the sun. And that's why collectible card games are so popular. Now, my problem with some of the ones like Final Fantasy XIV, I'll bring that up because it always kind of annoyed me, and it kind of was an immersion breaking thing where, you know, you're playing, you're collecting your cards, it's all great, but then you like get a special card from a person who exists in the lore, and I'm sitting there going, so how did you determine how powerful your card was compared to everyone else? Like, okay, I got I don't know, the Ashes Mage, since we don't know her name, and it's like, here's your card. You got the Ashes of Creation Mage character. It's like, well, great, but she's standing right over there, and it's kind of awkward playing the card. I felt the same issue in Gwent, where I'm playing Gwent in Witcher 3, and I'm playing a Triss card, and she's like standing next to me. I'm like,
oh, yeah.
And then I don't play the Triss card, and she gives me dirty looks, and she's like, why didn't you play my card? Don't you like my card? I'm like, well, no, you kind of suck in this case. No, I don't want your card. It's weak. No. And then she lights me up with fireballs. Yeah. I like those kinds of collectible things because they can tie them into other aspects of the game. Final Fantasy did it with raids. You could get them. They dropped off monsters and stuff like that. And they also kind of add to economy because you could sell them too for people who wanted to collect their decks. But getting them to line up with the lore, I wouldn't want to see it any characters that actually exist, but like, depending on how deep Ashes of Creation lore is, having, you know, collecting a king of long past that you're like, oh, you know, there's like a little lore, like, I think that'd be kind of neat to hide lore, right? Like, you get a card, it's like King whatever, King David, whatever his name is, ruled between error here, you know. I like lore tidbits. What do you guys thought?
So here's okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I like your idea, about how that can drive lore in the game. You have games like Dark Souls that the items themselves have lore attached to them. Mm-hmm. So you could actually use the cards to kind of expand upon the story, like even give kind of quotes from certain characters in the game's history they may not actually interact with, but kind of expand upon the history of the game. And the way you could kind of divvy those out for rarer cards, rather than just having them drop on like a raid boss, because then everyone can just go to that raid boss and get it, have them on like an NPC that's in the same area as that raid boss but moves around, that's hidden in that area, so that way you have to kind of go search it out. It also kind of does a dual purpose of exploring that world a little bit further and giving you a reason to explore that world too. Gotcha.
Yeah, I like it.
So there's something that I haven't seen done yet. It's probably something that would take its own game on its own to be done. But what if they could do Warhammer, like the figurines game, and a game?
No, I was actually thinking.
And you have a set amount of there's lots of ways you can do it. Like you have a unit points thing, and you get to select which figures you want to be as part of your army, and that's your strategy. And then you have the rule set, and it goes like. They can even just have it be a little miniature simulation that's magically animated. Once you select your army and place it on the battlefield, Stratego style, and then then it goes, and then you just have to watch, and you have like maybe 2 turns of reinforcements, and that's it. There's a lot of that. That's a very deep strategy game that we can get in. Like that's like a whole other game, but that's the level that they can take those kind of things for lore storytelling, because you can have some really cool.
I like that.
Figurines that are actually something that people would have to dump resources into to make little animated figures that are really powerful, that have their own little rule sets built into it.
No, and I like where you're going with that. I know you kind of laugh like it's silly, but these kinds of things are interesting because that fills in a 2-part point here. Like I also thought of Gwent, but Gwent is nothing more than essentially chess with cards. You got your 3 lanes, but thinking about other board games, like what you brought up with chess or checkers or Chinese checkers or anything of those, like they don't have to be like real world games, but they could make it more lore appropriate. And having to, I guess at this point, I was thinking that would tie into crafting an economy as well. You could make pieces for it. You could then create higher level pieces. Maybe the pieces have so many charges on them, so when you're playing a game, like you have, I don't know, Telchar, you have, I don't know, we'll call it a jewelry crafter profession or something, like whatever. And they made you a king piece, and you can play it like 4 times. And when you're looking at it, like, well, I can play those games, but I got 2 charges left, and then it magically shatters or whatever. In which case, then you'd have to buy another one. Mm-hmm. That kind of renewable resource, as long as the games actually, had a purpose to them, would be a way of funneling in, a crafting element to a game that you already have within taverns.
There's a fantasy novel series out right now called The Cycle of Iran that has a game in it called Melodune, which is like this massive strategy game that this one race of people plays, and they just determine the way things are made and the way that battles are decided through like arguments. Like they have to actually present like a logical argument, and then there's like a third-party arbiter that decides it. So like these kind of games can get extremely detailed, but they can also be very, very simple too. So you can have a simple rule set like chess kind of game, or you can have something very deep where it has as much depth as the base game. So that's kind of up to them if they want to go that hard on it. It'd be fun to see what they want to do. It's, we're just going to play quarters. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
So
I mean, Gwen gets praised a lot in the Witcher series as an amazing game that people like to play. But if you ever played Witcher 2, they had their idea of poker in it, which was a lot more simplistic. It wasn't a card poker. It was literally dice. Like each person had 5 dice, or 5 die, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. And they would roll them on the board, and you were able to select and keep them on your board, and you kept rolling till you got certain points. And it was essentially poker because, you created instead of cards, you were rolling the dice, and you have 3 of a kind, a full house or whatever, and that you would just keep rolling. It was an RNG roll to get your cards through the dice, and I thought that was actually simplistic but fascinating to play. And I often did because you were able to bet on it between the players. You each made a wager, and whoever won, you could raise the stakes at that point and then go from there. But they actually called it poker. And at first I was sitting there thinking about it, going, well, that's not really poker, because I was thinking the cards. But in reality, they were playing it the same way. As I was watching, I'm like, oh, it is the same thing. You just roll the dice, and then you put the numbers up on your bar, and then you got 2 of a kind. Whoever had the highest. Oh, I had 3 4s, but you had 3 5s. You had a higher score, therefore you won. I mean, that was something that was really fascinating, and I enjoyed it. I actually played a lot of it because it was the easiest way to make money.
Yeah.
Talking about how you were saying earlier about renewable resources for these mini games, with that fishing mini game we were talking about before, you could have people that could sell bait for the fish, like different types of bait, like different levels. Master crafters could sell maybe like a super bait or something like that. Whereas if you're just a novice, you can only sell specific types for lower fish. So you could definitely have more of an economy with that.
You could tie gathering into it too, because you'd have 2 different types of bait. You'd have live bait, which gatherers could then catch, and then again, Final Fantasy did this too, where they had live bait, which you caught from gathering, and then you had crafted lures that you got from one of the crafting professions. And it was neat because they caught different types of fish, and they worked in different weather conditions and things like that. So if there was a type of mini game like that, it's something you could do. Another game I thought of, which is its entire system, and now I don't know if I'd really want to, and it's the next question, but I'm going to bring it up because it's in games. Mini pets and stuff like that have been pretty big within. Yeah, I know. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just kind of the same way. But World of Warcraft had their PokeWow, as we call it. And then it went over like a lead balloon, but it was essentially a pet arena called Lords of Verminion in Final Fantasy. They both did these. What are your guys' thoughts? I mean, I saw rolling of eyes, and I kind of agree with you, but
I think that the only one that I would be interested in is like a turtle race or something, like something kind of fun that you would expect to see at like a harvest festival or something, a pig race or something. That stuff's cool, like that's fine, but nothing like where you get to go and collect the pets and then have them fight each other, because then we'd have an RMT advantage in the Hero of the People monster.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's not going to happen, I don't think. But I think that personally, I would not want to see it devolve to a pet level thing like that, where you're having like an arena battles and stuff like that. However, I think that if they're willing to be this kind of like, it happened in the real world. People used to bet on dogfights and stuff. Like, so is that something that they're going to have? Is there going to be like a coliseum for people to go and, place wagers on animals killing each other? Like that's the ultimate, like how it's not the cute and fun little going after each other. It's like, oh, it's a bear fighting a horse. What's gonna win?
I could see that being a thing, considering that they actually do have an animal tamer profession.
Right.
You could breed animals to be like these super vicious beasts that fight just in the arena or fight against other players, and if you win something nice from it, I guess. But that'd be fairly entertaining to see what kind of monsters people can come up with.
Speaking of, like, we'll roll into right to the next question that I had here, and that was, what kind of games would we like to see in Ashes of Creation? You said there was like a beast tamer or an animal breeder. What about animal racing, horse racing?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
I think that would be something that's kind of interesting as a and I've seen games do that kind of thing with racing. Some of it's whatever, but some of it's like you got these wild tracks and there's little, you can raise different mounts to have different attributes, and then they have power ups and things that you can go as as a normal race would.
I think that if they're going to do that, you should be allowed to use your own mount, and specifically be able to breed mounts to become faster or more agile, or have a certain amount of hit points or something like that. And you should be able to do damage to the people in the race. It shouldn't be just a generic, run to point A, point B. you should be able to actually kick their horse or something like that, or run them into an obstacle that stops them. Because that add a little bit more entertainment to it, I think. Because there's a lot of kind of generic racing games, and they should have a little bit of a twist at least.
Did y'all have y'all played WildStar at all?
I didn't touch it, but I know they.
So they have these later, more recently, that rather than at the start, they have these like. You can have a hoverboard in that game and you go over, do tricks and stuff like that, and you have time. It's actually like right there in the city. They'll have like a play. People go and do these tricks and stuff, and it's just like an idle. It's an idle animation. Instead of people going and jumping across the bridge in Ironforge just 100,000 times, they actually go and do these little things, and it has an achievement tracker to see if you can beat the time just passively. So like. It has like a cosmetic. It has rewards that pop up if you get better and better times, and the really hard ones like not easy. Like you have to practice it a lot. Like so, I think it'd be fun for them to have built-in, possibly dynamic races, or maybe people can design them. Like I don't know if it's good enough to just have them evolve out of the world versus someone being like, okay, we're gonna place a flag here, here, and here, and here, and here, and those are all the checkpoints, and the people have to go to each. The person sponsoring it is the one making the race versus the game making it. So maybe that's fun.
Yeah, maybe a good way to do that is to have at the tavern, like you have to basically buy into the race there,
right? And
then that tavern is the one that set up the tracks. Like the owner of that tavern, he can basically put waypoints on the map, and you have to go through those waypoints. So that way, it is somewhat player generated, but it's also somewhat controlled at the same time.
And here's something I thought was kind of fun, and it's totally ripe for abuse, so obviously it's going to go in. But you mentioned the track. What if the people on the outside could, like you said, you have obstacles, player generated, players could, through a UI or whatever, try to trip up the racers by doing whatever. Now you would have to do it to a point where like it's a weird generated thing. Like, okay, you can select something and where you want to throw it, but there's like an RNG of whether or not it's going to happen between 1 and 3 seconds. That way you can't just okay, he's going to sit there and then throw like a log in front of the horse right away. You're like, I want to throw the log right there, and you hit it. It's like 1 to 3 seconds. So you kind of have to judge, okay, what am I going to get? Do I get 1 second and I can throw it out and the guy's not going to have any time to move? Do I place it far enough ahead so I know even if I hit 3 seconds, it'll land, but if it hits 1 second, the guy has plenty of time to see it and swerve out of the way? I just think it'd be kind of fun for the spectators to be like, could drop things in the map to try to mess with the player. And then it would actually be dynamic. Like the track could always be the same, but the players could mess with you. Or the spectators.
Yeah. Like a wacky races kind of thing, sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have that kind like it seems kind of more like a happy campy mentality, but that'd be fun to do as part of like a certain venue, maybe like if a civilization wants to invest in like a market fair or something like that, they can do that, and it will have the ability with an unlock within the civilization to do that. I wouldn't want everyone to have that kind of thing, but if someone like an economic node wants to focus on tourism or something like that and taverns and stuff like that, they can invest in these kind of cool little like advanced mini games that have that kind of deep throw the log in front of them kind of mechanics, because that's that player agency thing. You let the people that want to craft their world build it versus, oh yeah, there's just another theme park down the street. Like, okay, same thing, like it has to be it has to be novel, otherwise it's going to be boring. So
I agree. And along with that, you can also you can do a lot of like fair type games, like kind of simple things like throwing water balloons, throwing like maybe cabbages at people, so it's a little bit more themed to this world. It's something very kind of still immersive. I would have to say, like, maybe not something as simple as like throwing a log at someone, but maybe throwing a rotten tomato at their face as they're running past you, and then if it hits them, that knocks them off their horse for a second or something. Like, that'd be fun. It has to be kind of still themed that way, though.
Mm-hmm. And a game I've been playing a lot of recently, Guild Wars 2, actually has activities which are kind of fun. Now, I prefer more realistic, more dark and gritty and stuff like that. And I don't know how much this would fit, but they did a game. Literally, it's football or soccer. It's called Keg Toss, though, and it's a Norn game in Guild Wars 2, where they literally throw a keg of meat or beer in the center, and the goal is to grab it and run it back to your party table, if you will. And like all the people in there can like punch you, try to trip you, like rip the keg out of your hands. It's actually really fun and something I always had fun playing. There's a few other games. That was the first one I thought of. I mean, it's football, but it's a bunch of essentially Vikings. And what's the football? A keg of alcohol, and that's the game. It's a little silly when you look at it, and then I'm watching it and going, well, it's still actually a lot of fun regardless. It's, always fun to like kick a guy as he's running by and he drops the keg and you pick it up and try to run it back to your table.
I like that. That's an awesome concept, actually. Yeah,
it's fun, and I actually really like it. And I mean, they tied it into achievements, so they had achievements that you could get for it and experience rewards and things like that. That's kind of leading into our next topic, and that is distraction-based gameplay is all great. All right, like they're always fun. They're novel the first time you do them, but how do you keep people interested in continuing to play these, or is it even something you would want to see? Do you want to see these games incentivized, or do you really just want them to be what they were originally designed for? While you're waiting in a tavern, you have nothing else to do. You're playing a game.
I think that one of my kind of wants, especially with their focus on player agency, is to allow basically a civilization to set its own rules. So like a divine city could say no gambling, can't, none whatsoever. That generates a possible like underground like gambling environment where like people can do it, but if like the guards catch you and stuff, or like it allows for like some subterfuge going on and makes a really cool atmosphere for the the people trying to still do the vice, and especially if it's lucrative. So like there's a way of basically avoiding the taxes of something like that would normally be in a place where it's sanctioned. You can go and do it in the back streets and stuff like that, and it adds a little bit of mysteriousness to it. On the same token, a city that wants to tax it and make it so people have to get like a gambling house license or something like that would have to pay a tribute to run that thing, run their tavern that way. And, it allows them to generate revenue if they are able to possibly craft really fun games. I don't know if they're going to have a very generic or if it's going to be something like that racist thing. Like, let's say that's something that happens. If someone is willing to invest the money into generating all these assets, that's a place, and they have a good location, that hey, all go for it. Like that's your thing. Like you want to be that place of entertainment. You should be rewarded for it. So it's kind of up to them to decide. Intrepid up to decide is how deep they want to let it get, because it can go forever. Like we were talking about earlier, it can go very, very far, and it could be entirely game consuming. Wars could be fought over the loss or win of some a Gwent game, basically. You how dare you like slap your
well,
challenge you to a duel,
yeah. I think that along with that, if there is going to be gambling, there should be a system in place to hold the items to divvy out whoever wins, rather than it being player held. Because if it is player held, you always have that chance of the person just running away with it, and then what do? You can't do anything. So if it's a system built in that say like let's you put in your item, they put in their item, and then whoever wins gets it, I think that'd be much better. Plus you could put that into a lot of different things, like the arena, for example. Like let's say two people are fighting in the arena, the person that wins, they get their item that they gambled for. Same for the mini games. But like you were saying, you could literally bet, let's say like a castle. Your guild's castle versus their guild's castle. Here's
the deed. Pink slips. Let's go.
Right there. Come on. Do it.
Playing for pink slips. Oh.
I mean, that could literally solve a war right there, or it could start one. When it comes down to it, like that also makes it very meaningful as well, which I think ties into the whole kind of philosophy behind this game. I think that would actually make it much more rewarding.
Meaningful player conflict.
Yeah, I mean there's been so many stories in history, like in the real history of these very, epic like events in gambling that have caused massive changes to happen. Like for example, a lot in the West, a lot of the larger ranches and stuff have changed hands back and forth from gambling. Like there's a ranch in Texas where it's like a 15,000 acre ranch that was basically handed over from a poker game, a high stakes hold'em game back in like the early 1800s or something like that. That's the kind of stuff that this game could do, and it doesn't have to be those super deep, mini figurines kind of games. Just a simple Texas Hold'em or a poker kind of system where it's a very deep and complicated thing that people can bluff with each other, and there's ways of maybe even using their class specific skills to cause effects with it. Each one has their own character that they can pull into it, and there's counters and kind of maybe even a rock paper scissors kind of mentality with that, where it's there's this counter for this, like a warrior can beat a mage with this setup, but the mage beats the warrior with this setup. So there's always kind of I don't know if you've ever played Magic the Gathering, but it could be that it's Hearthstone's kind of like that, but there's not as many like straight up like differentiating builds in the same way. I mean, Hearthstone does have those, don't get me wrong, but like classic Magic the Gathering is very aggro, like red deck wins, beat 'em up, spellcaster, that kind of stuff. So if we could do those, maybe there's themes that you can take those games. That's something that they can do to make it be a very deep environment. So
I completely agree. I think that beyond what players are betting on their own, the rewards should be very simple for these games. It should be like a couple coins, or like let's say if you're playing at your local nodes casino, like if you get enough points, you can maybe win like a little mini pet or something that just follows you around, because they already have those in the game. So you could possibly have that as like a reward for like 30,000 coins or whatever. But beyond that, most of this should be player driven. It should basically be what I'm putting up to basically win this game against you. And that would encourage it.
I was gonna say they should definitely have minimum like no investment play, just to keep just so people get to experience it and practice. That then has like you play 1,000 games on your own against the bot or whatever. Here's a little thing, but you can go and ante up against the other players, and that's where the real money is, because there's going to be there's going to be sharks out there that that are willing to throw the castle down to win. So right? That's the deep flavor of it. And I just had a little quick thought about it. If this game is that massive, they could even have seasonal effects with the game. So like there could be different parts of like the card game, especially if it's like a magical card game, they could have it be like during the summer, like the red type deck or whatever, there's certain elementals or something that has their own flavor. So like you got to be kind of careful about what you're doing, and it adds a little bit more awareness to the world. Stuff like that's something that you can do. So
along with Aggelos, his card collecting, his whole collector purpose, right? You could have different cards with each different season that you can collect over time, possibly.
You could even you could go so far into it, like for the type of gambling you have, like you said, seasonal or whatever. But you could have regional rules. If there's a card game, you go into a certain city and just I don't know. Let's say it's a divine city or whatever, and they allow the card game, but they don't allow any demonic cards, whatever, because that's anathema to us. So you can't play any demonic deck if you had a demonic deck. They're like, no, we don't allow that. You can only play order decks or standard deck, and those kind of rules would change, and they could even switch it up based on like the gameplay it is, or just random. I know Final Fantasy does that. They do with their triple triad. It's it's almost like tic-tac-toe where you have to get a whole line, but the whole idea is to flip the other cards, where each card has 4 corners. Each one has a different stat value, and whoever has the highest number, unless flips the card to their color. But there are different rules where you might build your deck and you don't know what kind of rules you're going to get until you sit down at the table, and then all of a sudden it's like you line your entire deck up with like high end cards, so they all have like 9s across. So you're like, yeah, and then it's a reverse deck where lowest number wins, and you're like, like, I've been screwed in that game by doing that because I like, okay, highest number always wins. Okay, well, here's this card. This is like 6 across the board, and then it's like lowest number wins, and they show up with like all these basic like 1 1 1 1. I'm like, but I'm out, you know. That's something that's kind of neat. Another thing that would be kind of neat is player run or even system run tournaments for doing stuff for rewards, whether it's cosmetics. You know, we've all known, and Telchar can probably attest to this. I think we've all heard the monocle gate thing where, you know, you have the little monocle to show off. You know, like they could do some sort of cosmetic that you won a regional tournament of, you know, whatever lore specific they want to make it, you know. Noble gear or whatever, like you can afford, like they can put cosmetics as a reward, and people will come back for cosmetic rewards, earning them in game. You know, like you said, it could be a regional tournament, and the mayor's hosting and say, okay, whoever wins this regional tournament at the tavern will win this prize Destria horse that I have here, you know, and that becomes the reward.
Yeah. You can also do.
Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man.
I was gonna say I've been taking kind of like mental notes on what I might design for my event for my pledge reward, and one of the ones that's intriguing to me is, I don't know if they'll let me do it, but a semi-seasonal riverboat gambling house that pops up, and you have to do some kind of thing to get onto it, like pay Nessus to take you to it. It's like an undead kind of thing or something. It's like a ghost, like a ethereal thing that's just moving down the riverways, and it goes and travels all the rivers in the area. But if you are that intense into it, you hustle to go catch up to it when it gets there. You can go and you have a very limited amount of time on there, because it's going to fade back into the ethereal, into the mists to win. And then there's like super cool cosmetics that come from winning, and like that could be like the hotspot tournament. Like awesome. That like something like that would be really cool. I don't know if they'll be willing to put that much time into it, but I think it'd be awesome.
Depends. I mean, in other games they do. I mean, it might not be it might not be called Halloween, but a lot of games make up their own holidays specifically designed around real world holidays. I mean, Hollow's End in World of Warcraft, like during the week of Halloween, Witches Festival in ESO. Like they tried to tie real world holidays, and they kind of give it in-game flair, but like your idea right there with the ghost ship showing up around Halloween, that would fit perfectly. And at that point, cool. It's a once a year thing, so you're rushing to get whatever it is you have, because that's your once a year time to get cosmetics. That was something that World of Warcraft did amazing.
Yeah.
With their year, because I would log this cat. I'm telling you what is going to drive me nuts, because she keeps knocking my stuff over, and I'm like, no. I have a cat spray thing here. Yeah, you can't get away because this thing shoots really far now too, doesn't it? That cat, I'm telling you, she just wants to be on every show. I'm like, no, get away. But that was something like when Halloween was coming up and I knew the week was there. If there were cosmetic rewards that I didn't have, whether it be mini pets or costumes or whatever, with ESO and their Witches Festival, they had a bunch of different stuff. There were like crafting motif pages, so I could craft in like this Halloween-ish style. Oh, I farmed that like crazy because I wanted whatever those cosmetic rewards were, because I knew I wouldn't have a chance to do it for a whole year. So I blocked out time to be there for that event. That was something that was fun, and I enjoyed it.
I think that'd be also a really good way to get the entire community together, since there's no real fast travel. People would literally have to like go on like caravans to get to this place to go meet. So like you'd have people from other parts of the world that you never would interact with, all meeting for this giant festival. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would be cool. And it'd be, I think so. Like I'd thought on expanding on the idea a little bit too. So like if the areas it moves past might have other things that go on along the shore. Like it'll reveal the past times or something like that. It'll be like the ghosts of the old area will be there, and you can interact with them and stuff. And that'd be cool. That would be part of the quest chain that it would exist for 2-3 weeks or something like that. The ship wouldn't just poof like instantly. You'd have time to go and do it, but it'd be a long, pretty interesting quest chain. You see it moving by. Even if you have a boat, you go to it and you just go right through it. Like, what the heck? What's going on here? Like, so it's really, you see this huge you've seen those steamships, right? From the old, back in the the one I'm talking about, the huge wheel in the back, like just moving down, and it's like that's like high technology stuff. This is from before the crash of civilization thing, and it there it goes, and that either people will be like, oh, and they'll move on, or they're going to be like, what the heck is that? There's going to be people following it down the river. So.
And another thing, based on what you just said, and it actually made me think about it, because like your event being tied to a very specific thing, it would create legends, right, around it. Like, okay, and depending on how things go, I know there's several places out there people create wikis and stuff real quick, but I mean, it could move and there could be hints ahead of time. Or even if they didn't go that far, but it would create legends. The other thing I thought of was, like you said, these regional tournaments. If the region moved and encouraged people to go to it, that would create a level of you're bringing people from other parts of the world who want to contribute to whatever the tournament is. Maybe especially with cosmetics, but that creates player agency in that. Sinbad's coming up to the node that DCN holds because there's a tournament there, and as he sits there, he goes, I like this city. I think I'm going to take it now, because I never would have traveled up this way if it wasn't for this cosmetic tournament in a tavern game. But now that all these players are coming for this moving tournament because they want cosmetics, because, that's something that really does drive MMO players, people show up and go, I like the city. I'm going to claim it, and that created a player event based on an NPC event that was going on, because maybe either I'm in off some far off corner that feels like there wouldn't be any resources, but when you get there, you're like, oh wow, like they built up this high that obviously there must be resources. I never would have traveled this way except for this tournament here, and now that sort of thing has. Go ahead.
I was like, it could. This is another thing I had. So if they want it to be triggered by like civilization level, instead of it just existing for let's say we don't get to the first round of civilizations by the time, like there's not like any port cities that are of level 6 or whatever. Basically, they could have it based on how many river civilizations exist in entirety, and once the sum of like the quality of people are up high enough to where someone would actually enjoy. Because like if that showed up the day one, I'd be like, I can't go. I gotta do my thing. Like I'm working on my city. Like if people would once people have experienced it a little bit, it'll pop up, and it could go make port at every one of the cities that are along the river, and it'll stay there for several days. As a neutral ground area that everyone can go to. But as soon as you leave the boundaries of the ghost ship area, it's like, well, you're in hostile territory. So it's a way of forcing interaction, but it makes you kind of like stare at your enemies like, like so.
That would actually tie into how their nodes are developing too. Like with the monster events. Whenever a node reaches a certain level, sometimes it will trigger a monster event. Instead, you could have like these, like your event where it's basically like this kind of get together and go game with each other. It'd be a different way of doing it. It would make it a little bit more dynamic for the world.
There could be lots of different mini games that you can do. You could even fish off of it and catch ethereal fish. I don't know. There's lots of things that they could use that asset for to get the most money out of it. So.
Right. And all these things that we've been talking about, I know we kind of spread off of the idea of tavern games, but I like the theory crafting that we've been doing, because here's the one thing that every festival brings in, especially even modern times it's that way, but what also came along with festivals, right? There was a lot of exchange of money, a lot of a wealth of specific areas holding festivals would often grow because you have a lot of visitors. Crime rates also go up, and there's your PvP aspect. You have a bandit group or a bandit guild who goes, okay, there's going to be tons of people out here for this tournament. They're going to be doing all these different things. I just have a fresh batch of targets, for the taking at this point. So you actually created through the use of these distraction-based gameplay, or these things like this, if you have tournaments and stuff that draw people, you've now just created another aspect of gameplay, this emergent type gameplay from bandits who go, all right, people are now gambling on these things. They're walking away with more money than they had before, more resources that they had before. now it's time to start collecting off of these people. You know, we're going to play the highwaymen. You can't cross this bridge without a toll kind of deal, or we kill you. I
had another because like I was kind of like looking through the known mechanics. So like how they have a flagging bounty hunter system.
Yep.
For corrupted people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if the people that are corrupted and like doing just like they want to be the bad guy, but they also like maybe they're trying to fit the rogue mentality of being like the good gambler kind of person, like, or even if they're role playing, or if don't want to miss out on the cosmetics, like there's gonna be bounty hunters scoping the ship out.
Oh yeah.
Event the whole time, just like waiting for people to come, and it's going to cause a lot of strife. So bandit crews, like you said, could move in and push the unorganized resistance out, and that would piss me off if I was a person trying to go and get on the ghost ship, and nope, sorry, like.
Well, for the nodes moving along too, you could also hire mercenaries to go protect the ship. So you have like a whole new economy basically moving around that. That's awesome. One thing I was kind of thinking about that's similar to your ship idea, it's kind of the same idea actually, but just like on land, is what if you have in the different taverns and different nodes kind of going along, it's basically this giant tournament. Kind of like moving from one city, you have like a qualifying round in one city, it goes to another city, it goes to another city, just on land. So you have like two different ways of developing that.
Yeah.
It would probably have to be external to the civilizations. It would be something that the game basically just decides, like the guild of poker players is hosting this thing, and it just chooses the most lucrative taverns around the world, and then you just have no choice. Like you can bid your tavern out to it, so it doesn't just force the choice on you, but like you can just put it up, and then it just causes it to happen. Extra.
You could also have it sponsored by the Thieves Guild
or the Merchants Guild. Yeah, any of those.
Yeah, true.
Trying to bring affluent people into your city. That's one of the things it could do. All right, the last question that we really had, and it kind of leads up into this, with Tavern Games being accessible. I know we've been talking a lot about Tavern Games, and I mean a lot of these things that we've been talking about the last half have been ways that Tavern Games could affect in-game economies, in-game events, things of that nature. But what about taking Tavern Games outside the game through such things as companion apps? If a companion app is something that is going to come into the game, maybe not. It all depends whether or not the game becomes popular enough to warrant such a thing. I'm always a big fan of companion apps, but I know that is an expense that most games can't afford or don't want to really deal with. But would you like to see ways of being able to play Tavern Games from like a smart device?
I'll go first.
Yeah,
I think it would be good if they are the simplistic type of games that have their own flair, like let's just say like Texas Hold'em or whatever, a poker kind of game that they've converted to that world. Sure. I personally would probably never play it. I just don't really like mobile games at all. That's just not my thing. If I'm going to play games, it'll be PC Master Race. But I think that they have a market for it, for people wanting to get the idle time but still be immersed in the universe. I don't know if it's something that you'd want to be tied in to the actually AOC universe versus just being a separate entire entity so people can practice or play the card game on the side that has its own environment. Because if you have people on mobile interacting with the real world but they're not logged in, that kind of causes a little bit of like slippery slope of like, well, are they actually at risk for being in the game, kind of stuff like that, especially if they're under siege or something, and then they kind of pop out of the game but still get to play their, have their fun times. It's like, well, like maybe you should be defending your house, like kind of thing. So yeah, it's a kind of a slippery slope in my opinion to have it be in-game asset creations, possibly winning money, versus just having something fun to do and maybe tracking achievements or something like that. Separate economies, basically. So,
yeah, I'd agree with you on that. I think that if you're going to have a game outside of the game, like on like a mobile app or something, it should either be its own separate game or it should force you to log back in to get the different things you need to play it. Because otherwise, it does run the risk of taking you outside of the game, and then you start to split your player base.
Now, what happens and if if like when you log into this, we'll say the companion app isn't just the game itself. It's a companion app. You can talk to your guild, whatever the idea would be. Maybe even view the world map and its current political standing, but you could play Tavern Games if you want, but it would actually dig into your inventory, or even fun, log your character in. Like, so your character would be standing
proxied in.
Yeah, you're proxied in while you're in there.
That seems interesting, but it also seems like that's a pretty big vulnerability to be abused. For especially like, you know, it's insane how crazy hackers get out there, but like having something like that tunnels in, even with two-factor authentication, you know, I've heard of people that get their phone stolen, and then the people like check to see what kind of game accounts and stuff they have on there. Like there's a story of a guy that he's a pretty large backer for Star Citizen, you know, several $1,000s, and somebody checked his phone that stole it, and they unlocked it, and his authenticator code popped up, and they're like, what's this? So they went and found it, logged in, and they realized they did some research and then siphoned off all of his ships.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So like it's a big vulnerability to dig into the game beyond having to actually install and then log in, having a two-factor, etc. So I'm very hesitant about digging in like that, you know. But having some kind of like over maybe you can like deposit, you can pull some gold out and deposit it in the e-wallet of the mobile app. Maybe you know, you can transfer funds back and forth between, but I'm still hesitant on that. So.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was actually a question that just came to my head. I'm just curious what people think about that one. Yeah, no, I could see that being an issue. Not only that, but there's no way to defend yourself if by, you know, you log in, your character's in. Maybe it would give you a warning like your town may be under siege. And I know towns are quote unquote safe zones, but that doesn't stop player killers. They could come in, but then they have to defend themselves against player. I don't believe at this point anyway, the way they designed it is that even while being in the city, you're still susceptible to player killing.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just you're surrounded by 500 guards. Would the guy make it out in time is highly unlikely. But you know, that was kind of like ultimate line. Like cities were considered safe zones just because you had these overpowered guards. But you still had to I've seen people kill right at the main bank and then just make it out because no one called a guard on them or they were AFK, and you know, you still had to call a guard so that the guards would come running. Otherwise, they just continued their patrol route. So if you waited till they were on the far end of their patrol route, kill the person who's AFK and make a book for it, that was still something that would happen.
I have a feeling they will do that, especially with the parkour mechanics and the ability for like, you know, stealth to be in there. Like that assassination will happen. Like that's going to be something that people will engage in. And I am a total proponent of not having any like true invulnerability areas. Like maybe like one or two spots like in the newbie starting areas and stuff like that, because that kind of like keeps people safe like that so you don't get griefed. But like once you're out in the real world and you've had enough, like maybe a certain, even maybe like a playtime kind of thing, or it can't be an opt-in either. You can opt to stay at the starting area or don't play. Like I want it to be like mistakes need to get punished, and people that want to do the risk. And this goes back into the tavern thing too. Like if a gang of bandits wants to come in and bust the vault down, I'm totally fine with that. You needed to have better security. Like that's, you know, that's why casinos have so many guards, because like, you know, all it takes is somebody to come hold them up and grab all the customers' money and all the vault money and take off, you know, like.
I think that'd be a good idea, maybe for like higher level taverns, maybe like one that's already part of like a level 3 or level 4 node or something. For something that's just developing, I think that can be too easy to abuse.
Maybe if you've invested into the big, you know, once you've unlocked that big level, like the grand casino node talent or whatever, like that's something you have to consider is petty thievery, and because like people will try to steal and cheat no matter what. Like, if I would like it for them to have a cheating mechanic in there. Like if people want to try to slip cards and stuff like that, I think it'd be fun. Like if you can try to catch them doing the animation, like you can, I don't know.
That'd be cool. Maybe like as a thief or a rogue, you could basically get like a bonus modifier to that.
Right, yeah, slip the card, you know, wear long sleeves and got it.
Very nice. I like that. All right, I guess that kind of brings us to the end of our Tavern Games. Of course, if you're watching this or listening to this on iTunes, Google Play, or anything like that, Stitcher Radio, wherever else you can find your podcast, and you have comments, you can head over to our website, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There's a contact us. Why don't you send us your thoughts or leave us a comment on the video, that kind of thing. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Tavern Games as well. Possibly may even get them brought up in a future episode. Who knows? All right, I definitely want to thank my co-host. So this is time for personal plugs. So Telchar, why don't you go ahead and go first?
As said before, I'm the Guildmaster of Sons of the Seven. We're a newly formed Ashes of Creation exclusive guild that's kind of based around a mercantilism and political focus. Our goals are to try and be some of the best crafting and tradesmen in the game, but that also doesn't mean we're afraid of, defending ourselves either. So it's not going to be something where we're going to bow to the local warlord. We have a pretty detailed charter that guides us, and if you're interested in kind of reading more about it or talking to one of us, please reach out to me. I'm sure Aggelos will link the Discord info for myself, and then as well as our guild website.
Yep.
I'm sure you'll all be hearing a lot from me coming up soon, and then as well as other visits on DCN. So feel free to check us out.
Absolutely. Sinbad.
All right. Well, I'm one of the co-leaders of Vengeance, a PvX guild exclusive to Ashes of Creation. We actually have been around for a while underneath a different name, but we just recently changed our name to Vengeance to kind of signify what we're looking to do in the world, which is dominate it. And we're very PvX, so we are going to be focusing on both the economy, but also on the PvP aspects of the world. And we intend to be one of the best guilds, if not the best guild in our server. So we're hoping to do a lot of world firsts. We're hoping to do a lot of great things in the world that people can remember us by.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely I will have these guys back on the show again very soon, I hope. So, I mean, hey, they agreed to come on once, now twice. People don't seem to realize when I get guest host on the show, I hold on to them and I don't let them go, because if I enjoyed having them on, they get pulled on even when they don't want to. So you'll definitely hear from both Telchar and Sinbad again in the future. They can't get away. I won't let them go. All right. So thank you so much for listening to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. You can find everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. That's where you can find our link for Discord. You will find the links to both the websites and Discords and stuff like that for both of my guests as well in the description of this show, both here and on the website. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch @/Dungeon Crawler Network. I figure that's the easiest way to say it. I really appreciate you guys watching or listening, and we will see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later, everybody.
See ya.
See ya.